I learned a long time ago, if I'm out of state presenting, it's real easy. And of course, no offense to these wonderful co-presenters I have, but I learned that when you're in state, you're just really an ordinary guy. When you're out of state, you're an expert. You know, you're somebody who really, really, really knows their thing. These folks really do know their thing, but I always get a kick out of traveling and people coming up after and saying, wow, what you had to say was this, that, and the other. And I know a lot of the people in this room would be laughing because they say, well, we also know the real Gordon, and we know what he's capable of in other ways. And so I wanted to kind of have a little fun, obviously, with the title, because ARC is what we're kind of here for, and then evidence-based practice. But in order to get us kind of, you know, Mike, when he got a hold of me and said, I'd like you to speak, he said, you're kind of the appetizer before the main meal. See, I don't think they picked that up, did you? Appetizer before main course. That was kind of what and so he said, you know, you're going to kind of make or break us from the start, so we want to make sure that we have some fun. So what I did is I want to show you, no, not that. I want to show you what I consider to be there we go. Something profound. Now, I do have to make a disclaimer. I know we have to have separation of church and state, but I think you'll all agree that this is probably one of those that's acceptable. If I can pull it out.
Get on the ark! Everyone on the ark now!
I think we should get on the ark.
I agree. I think we should get on the ark also.
I'm cold, I'm wet, I'm going home. Ladies first, move! Oh my God, this is happening. This is really happening.
Oh. Get everyone on the ark now! Get on the ark now! Let's go! Get on the ark! Let's go! 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 Get on the ark! Let's go!
We're gonna need a bigger boat. Stay here with the kids.
Everyone, up the ramp! Onto the deck! Come on! Hurry! Dylan, get back inside. It's too dangerous.
No, Dad. I told you I'm with you.
Careful, everyone! In the ark! In the ark! Watch your step! Up the ramp, everybody! Good. Guys, help me with the door! Get the door! Get the door!
So my natural question would be, so who's on the ark with us? You know, as soon as I got the whole picture of the ark, it was amazing how that came to my mind before anything else did. And in watching that, you notice how quickly people respond when all of a sudden they see this big emergency. Well, we obviously know in the system for a long time that we've had a real emergency when it comes to reentry and recidivism and other types of problems, and how to best manage, deal with, or address those issues in a collaborative type of way. And, of course, let me make sure. Oh, good, it allows for me to do that. You know, this is the kind of people that we have right now on our boats at times. I worked for several years with juvenile offenders. I had 1,800 kids that had done a lot of not so good things. In fact, one time on my caseload, I had 25 kids that had taken the life of someone else. But because they were charged as juveniles, they got to come see me when they were released from juvenile corrections system. At that time, I really didn't believe, I really had a strong belief in the kids. We were doing a lot of great things with them and had them involved in a lot of programs and things, but I really had concerns about the adult group because I just didn't think that they were going to be anywhere near as successful until 4 or 5 years ago when I started to get involved in a big way with adult corrections, with Bureau of Prisons, with the National Institute of Corrections and others, and through a number of different events and trainings and experiences, I started to realize that, you know what, we can have a huge impact on reentry. But in order to do it, there would need to be some serious usage of what has been proven to be evidence-based types of practices. And so I'm just going to give you a little overview of that because our other speakers are going to be really talking about a number of things that are real critical. And so I want to just mention a few things that we see happening in general that really impact this type of a group. Now, when I look at offenders, I don't look at them in the same way that others might in the system, behind bars or in court or other things. I look at them because I also work for a system that's part of the workforce development system, so we look at them as potentially what they could become. And what we're hoping for, of course, once they go back into our communities, is that we get people that can succeed in a number of ways, in a number of roles, and that occupationally they can do some really positive things. We want productive citizens again. You know, in Philadelphia, they refer to them as the returning citizen. Whatever you may call them, there's all kinds of potential, and there's all kinds of ability, and of course, as we know, the great majority of people getting out of the facility could probably be helped in some significant ways, and you really only have a high-risk group that you need to spend so much time with, and that's part of the evidence-based philosophy as to what happens, but so many of these people are going to be coming back to our neighborhoods. They're going to be around us and our children, and frankly, there's a whole lot of them that aren't going to be a strong risk, but they need to have service and other things that are going to help them to make it through and to be successful in whatever it might be. I apologize, some of these slides aren't as clear when I looked at them and that, but so I think we all know that reentry is possible. The big question is, can we get past the initial type of feeling that, you know, are they going to be able to make it? Can they be successful? Can a person who's been behind bars for so long actually make it in our society again and be accepted by others? Well, if you have a family member that happened to be someone who spent some time in the system, and you love that person, you believe in them, you're hoping beyond hope that people are going to accept that concept. But there are some barriers, and I just wanted to mention a few that came from, if you're not familiar with National Institute of Corrections' transition from the community, or from prisons to the community model, I'll talk a little bit about what we call the Transition Model Initiative in Utah, which is based upon that. In that handbook, these were some of the main things that kind of made sense. That were barriers up front. Now, because I work in the vocational rehabilitation system professionally, and because I'm a licensed counselor and work with people with disability, I'm used to mental illness in all of its forms. I'm used to physical disability. I'm used to substance abuse, which is very much a disability. And because we deal with that, this made good sense to me. 1/3 of adult offenders having a diagnosable mental disorder. I think it's almost higher than that in some ways. 3/4 of adult inmates, substance abuse problems, but only 10%. Now, these are national statistics, not necessarily Utah. And in Utah, there's a lot of good things we're doing in programming, and my colleagues from programming are here, and I have to say there's some good things that are happening, but this is national. 10% only are getting formal treatment in any manner, which is kind of a scary thought. 60 to 75% have substance abuse difficulties as well on top of that. One thing they don't mention on here, which I present on oftentimes, is brain injury and offenders in the system that have that. The great majority of offenders that have been in the system for a while have had significant brain injury. In fact, we find 75 to 85% have been knocked out, seriously assaulted in some form, whether as a youth or as an adult or both, and those things come back to haunt you years later. And a lot of our criminal behavior that people learn and develop is because of the vulnerabilities the brain has caused over time that were never really addressed. And One of the toughest things is when you get someone like that for the first time in their life, you do a neuropsychological evaluation on them and you say, guess what? This is the reason this section of your brain's working the way it is, and it's made you susceptible to this or that influence. And sometimes that's a first-time thing. And so a third of inmates receive vocational training while incarcerated. Obviously, there's some problems with that. And then, of course, so many have children that are underage living at home that we have to deal with. And, of course, for those of us who work in fields where we talk education, employment, and things, it's getting out and finding jobs. It's getting out, finding employment, and not having the barrier that exists with you having a felony record. We can do a lot about teaching someone who's coming out of the system how to give a good felony-type speech to an employer about, this is what I've learned, this is who I was, I'm trying to be something different, I'd like an opportunity in that. But there's always that big ball and chain that's going to kind of sit there with them until they get the confidence to be able to do it the right way. Well, the only way they're going to learn to do that is through individuals in the community that are willing to help with that process of transition so that they can be successful. And when they go to different events and they meet with employers, that they can have the confidence they need, that they can have the resumes they need to make things successful, and that they feel like someone is willing to give them a chance, especially if they've done what we would consider their time for what they have, for any kind of crime they've committed. At the same time, though, it's important that we teach them that it's not a free ride once you get out either. And a lot of times in the system, we have a lot of people that get out and say, oh, I need to be referred to these local organizations because they're going to buy me cars and tools and take care of this, that, and the other. And that's not the case at all. You need to be eligible for those programs. You need to play the game with us the way you need to play the game, and we can give you things as you go that are literally incentives to make these things happen so you can move forward in your life. And we see that happen. So if you're going to have someone that's going to be successful, and we know of lots of people who have been successful who have been at one time or other involved with the system, there's a lot of things that will need to happen to make that happen. And it is going to take a shift in the way we think. If we want to employ, if we want to give anybody a chance, in whatever form that may be, we have to kind of change our whole thinking about things. And because this is a judicial group and a group of correctional types of folks and district folks and, of course, community providers, and I know we have county people here and state people here, it's that collaboration that I'll talk about that's going to be absolutely critical in making good things happen. So these are some things that we have found are working. Now, back in 2008, the federal government put out a number of grants. One of those was the Second Chance Grant that you're probably familiar with. I had the good fortune of being on the grant review team for those initial grants, so I got to review dozens of grants from across the country, including the 8 states that I'm going to mention something about that have become model programs. When we first saw their programs, they looked innovative. They looked like they might work. We didn't totally know for sure. And over the last 6 or 7 years, they have proven that they have not only notable success, but the amount of money that's been saved by those states and the recidivism change in percentage has been dramatic. And so I want to share a little bit of what that's all about. The National Reentry Center released that report that said there was compelling evidence that the entire state could change in terms of its recidivism if you do certain types of practices. So they wanted to find out what are things that work. And of course, some of the presenters today are going to be speaking about the assessment, the evaluation, how we can really measure things. That's not my forte, and so I look forward to hearing from them. These highlighted states, I put 7, there's actually 8, and the 8 are listed there below. Each of these states has done some unique things, some very similar, but some very different, and I want to share at least one quick example of each of those. And of course, give credit to the National Reentry Center and Council of State Governments because they're the ones that put that initial report together, made this happen. Colorado, the community-based treatment thing, what they have done, they've saved up $1.4 million has been saved and reinvested in community treatment by just reclassifying substance abuse and possession offenses. By reclassifying them in some form, they've saved the state that kind of money. Promoting continuity of care, There's a step-down type of procedure they have for people who are being released that instead of just putting them right out in general supervision, they step them down into an intensive level of supervision for 3 or 4 months and then work them gradually into a normal supervision, and they seem to do a whole lot better. And the recidivism rate has gone down because of it. Tailoring approaches to individual needs. The State Board of Pardons, believe it or not, has actually had formal motivational interviewing training as a group. And they are to use motivational interviewing in their probation or their parole hearings. And they do. And so they're asking, they are basically using those same techniques mixed with a little cognitive behavioral therapy and making real inroads in how offenders are treated and how and the outcomes. And then, of course, incentives. Offenders in Colorado can earn 12 days a month for participation in other types of programs, 12 days off of their sentence per month. So that's what Colorado's doing that's really innovative and has worked well, especially for a lot more of the low and medium risk population, as you can imagine. Connecticut, doing a lot of the same kinds of things with the intensive supervision that I mentioned, but there are, on the improving response, parolees are given 120 days of intensive supervision, real intensive supervision on almost a daily basis. They're talking in some form with their parole officer and or meeting to do certain things. What I really think, and you're going to learn this in a minute, in several of the states, they're given the parole officer or probation officer, delegated authority through the judicial process to do things that normally would be reserved for the judges in terms of a hearing or a revocation. And in fact, in 3 or 4 of the states, the officers are actually able to send people and, in a sense, send them to 1, 2, or 3 days of jail time without having to go through the regular court process that they would normally have to go through. That's something very unique and something that obviously the judiciary bought into, and it's worked successfully in terms of court costs and the time as well. Georgia spends a lot of time with their accountability courts. They spend a lot of money in keeping accountable the offender themselves, and so they thought that court process, which has been a kind of a best practice model, works well. If you look up data on that, there's a ton of stuff on the internet I'd refer you to that would help with that. The alternative to incarceration. By the way, that Connecticut group actually has a best practices unit that helps them get through that whole process. Alternative to incarceration, there is the expansion of the reporting centers, their community correctional facilities, the halfway houses and that. Several of the states have halfway houses that are 75 to 80% privately contracted or owned. They're not run by the states. It's all a private provider organizations. And so what they do is they're giving them all kinds of financial incentives for getting people through the process and getting them out successfully in a quicker amount of time. So it's become very cost effective for those people and a real incentive. Here's somewhere you can just kind of look through. There's reentry councils are working well in a lot of states. We have some good things happening with our UDOWD program, which I'll mention real briefly, in Utah. But graduated sanctions, a lot of stuff is just so different than it was looked at before. And people are trying new things, and they're talking to other states and seeing what can happen. And when you see the recidivism rates and the changes, you realize that these things can work. A lot of good data collection things. They use a lot of the sanction types of stuff before. A lot more discretion for an officer to use, and a lot more teaching the officer how to use not only motivational interviewing as a technique, but also the best way to deal with an offender in a kind of more humane way of looking at things, to keep them as safer, but also to kind of mix accountability with dignity the right way. And so what they're basically saying is, we don't want you to change what you're doing in a traditional sense, but we want you to look at potential things that could work in a different way. And Rhode Island, a lot of stuff with collaboration they've been doing. Their reentry programming is enormous. And so if you look a little bit closer at their things, you'll learn more. I'm trying to get through some of this because I know we're a little behind time in that. So you have to develop kind of a rapid-fire approach. So if there are any questions, please stop me. But I wanted to make sure you had at least an idea of what people are doing. Lots of supervision practice, training, and then, of course, a real focus on need, risk, and responsivity, which are three real characteristics of evidence-based types of practices that has been proven to work when you're looking at those things in how you set up supervision or how you plan things while they're in the facility still. And then, of course, the last one, Wisconsin, doing a lot of good things in terms of employment readiness and really looking at targeted services. But you notice, again, alternative sanctions, ways that the officers can work in a different way without having to necessarily go through a whole process with the judges. And that's a good thing because the state has just noticed that it frees up good time that the judges can have for a number of other things, because there's a whole lot of people that are getting in trouble for some much more minor types of things. So they have sanctions for those, but in a different way. Here are I just put this up for your viewing. I don't want to say viewing pleasure because it's kind of basic types of things. It kind of seems boring when you're first looking at it, but it's so critical in terms of how we measure things, how we structure things, how things are done for targeted groups. I'm sure that's going to be discussed more by, I hope, others in the group here about risk assessment and those types of things. But I wanted to at least give you an idea on that, because in Utah, as you're aware, we're doing, Governor Herbert has made some statements recently about prison reform and how he wants to see things happen. Those of you who've been reading the paper have noticed that the Commission on Criminal Juvenile Justice, CCJJ, has actually been tasked with finding out what can work, how they want things to happen, where they want the new prison to be. There's 25 literal locations that have already been narrowed down to. I don't know how they're going to narrow down from some of that. But by November, they need to have good recommendations to the governor and to the legislature about what they're going to do for prison reform in Utah. I'll let you read through these because I don't want to, I think the biggest thing on here is the governor's statement about prison gates have to be a permanent exit and not just a revolving door. And so he wants basically all the systems, including corrections, to run like any other agency in state government, although we know there are challenges in corrections that other agencies don't have at all. So there's a lot more to work with, a lot more to teach. I was hoping, I don't think Director Cook's here right now, is he? Roland Cook? Okay. He made this statement in a newsletter that just barely came out to state employees about incarcerating people does not prevent recidivism. It just temporarily punishes them. What we need to do is worry about what we're going to do once they move beyond that. And then, of course, I just mentioned that about the criminal justice system and how they're going to develop some good recommendations on how to make this work better in Utah. Wikipedia. I go to Wikipedia for a number of definitions. Even though we all know that Wikipedia has a lot of odd stuff that people add, the basic one here matched up with some of the others that I knew. Improving things literally in the system itself is what we're trying to do. So I mentioned Utah, we have what we call the Utah Defendant Offender Workforce Development Task Force. Just to give you an idea, how many in this room have been involved with UDOT in some form? See, now look around and you see, there's a huge amount of people. When we first started this, there were just a few of us. And a few of those people are sitting in this room right now. So the whole thing was literally a collaboration between federal, state, local, faith-based partners to knock down recidivism by increasing employment, community awareness, and knocking those barriers out of people's lives. And for the last several years, we've been doing it. UDOT's now become more of a nationally known program because of how we were able to bring, especially the federal and state systems together. Workforce development, vocational rehab, state correctional systems, as well as the Bureau of Prisons and others. And then, of course, our county groups who are here represented. Lots of people on here you can see. We've added others, and we will continue to add. But we realized that the big missing piece was business. Employers are so critical to anything we do if we're going to make it successful for the person getting out. They need to be able to have an opportunity to move forward. And this just gives you an idea. We actually have an advisory group that's made up of essentially executive directors of agencies and organizations, or people that can have real decision-making ability on a fiscal sense or in a policy sense. We have a working group that several of us have been involved in that really recommend to them things we think ought to happen from more of a ground level. But it's these county groups that you see on the bottom that have been so effective, because they're able to meet on a regular basis, and because of a number of agreements to release information and other things, they are able to literally spend time talking about individual people and what it's going to take to provide a good wraparound of services to make positive things happen for individuals. And so we've seen some great things that way working. We just need to get more of a good reporting system for how to collect all that, and Mark, I know, is going to be talking about some of that later, and we're excited to see what can happen that way. Now, the transition model that I mentioned, because it's based on the TPC model, which is the National Institute of Correctional model for getting out of prison, what the 8 states have done, Utah wants to, with the stuff we're doing right now, we want to be one of those next few states that are on the map for really making a huge impact. UDOWD has done some amazing things in helping us get there, but there is so much more than employment and education. When you're talking housing and licensing, and when you're talking a number of things with substance abuse and other issues, restorative justice, you name it, we have several committees now that we've actually brought together to help in this whole process of letting offenders have that opportunity they need, so that we don't have to worry about them becoming a problem down the road, or just continuing to cost us court, welfare and other types of costs, which is what will continually happen. These are the objectives. Accountability is really big with us, obviously, for the offender, but also for the programs that are working with the offenders. If we're going to transition people from prison to the community, we need to do it through a number of ways, and the best way is through some of the collaboration that we have going now, and constantly being there for each other and support. And then, of course, sharing of information is critical. In Utah, we do something in Utah. I can speak for our vocational rehabilitation program. We're the only program I know of in the country that actually has access to the State Department of Corrections offender tracking system. Now, not everybody in our system does. They had to go through a process to get that approval, but probably 25 of our counselors and our technicians that work with these folks as they're getting released are able to go in and find anything that an officer, an agent, or anyone else working in the correctional system would be able to find. We have special rights to that now. What that has allowed is not only quicker eligibility, but better treatment options faster, better collaboration. This is something that other states are very impressed that we were able to pull that one off, but that's one of the things we're doing in Utah that we want to be part of this new innovation. These are the authorities that are kind of involved. The correctional folks, of course, within the facility, correctional industries. We have a great correctional industries program in Utah. Those of us in state agencies have used correctional industries for all kinds of things, from promotional items to our furniture and everything else. They just do a fabulous job out there, and it's one of the best places to tour if you've never been, to see all the great things they do there. Plus, you might get a free license plate when you're there, too, that's personalized. Those are always great. And, of course, AP&P, the allied agencies, of which I'm a part of, and then more of our community partners to making those things work. And then, quickly, I'll just mention, because I know I have 4 minutes. Perfect. See, he keeps me up on this stuff. Transition itself is critical. If we can do transition and make it happen through not only getting people classified the right way and assessed the right way, but also planning for discharge, and do it in a way that can make sense through what they call a transition accountability plan. These plans literally are to increase our public safety, to restore what needs to be restored, and to provide restitution the way it needs to through the offender, to society, to the victim, or whatever that might be. The right treatment leads to the right success if we do things like we need to. what I'll want to do is probably through Michael, I'll make this PowerPoint available so that those who would like to get more of this, because we've gone through some things really quickly, that you can be able to do that. But there's just various aspects of this that will be part of our transition model initiative. So those in Utah, you will hear more and more of this process as we go, but I'm just giving you a little bit of an idea of what it means to get someone to where they can be discharged from supervision and have the appropriate type of aftercare in the community so they can do well. And then, of course, it's run by two of our groups. So let me just end with collaboration and partnership means everything. And the best way to do that is probably by sharing with you a story. I always like telling some kind of story to end any kind of presentation, because a lot of times that sticks with people even more. Well, there was a king in a kind of legendary kingdom centuries ago that the kingdom was so wide and had so much area that really there was only one good way that maybe they could get people across that, and that was to build a large highway that would span the entire kingdom itself. Well, that took several years to build. Once it was built, the king was so impressed and so proud that he decided to call everyone together to have a special day of kind of like a celebration of this new highway. Well, what he did is he said, what I would like is everyone to come in whatever they come in, whatever they can do that. But I'm going to have a contest. And the contest is that he or she who travels my highway the best is going to get a reward, a large reward. He didn't tell them what it was. But on the appointed day, they all started to come. And there were people in nice coaches and chariots, fine clothing, very wealthy people. There were even royalty. There were other groups. Then there were kind of the middle group of people. A lot of the working folks, maybe people that were craftsmen and had good technical experience and things. And then there were people who literally were beggars and pauper-like and really did not have anything at all. And they came in tattered clothing, but at least they tried to make their appearance as good as possible. They cleaned up for that because they all wanted to be a part of this contest because they thought we each have an opportunity to win this. Well, as they would arrive at the castle, there was a large feast planned, and everyone was invited, so this was a big deal. As each of them would arrive and appear before the king, several of them started complaining. Your Majesty, you got a great highway, but about a mile away from here, you got a part of the highway that's just like crazy. And he said, what do you mean? And they said, well, it is covered in rock and debris and trees and all kinds of stuff, and we can't get past it. So we had to spend hours just trying to get around all this big mess, and it probably would have been better if you had that thing cleaned up. You know, it's amazing how kind of brazen people can get when it's a contest like this and he's invited everybody. But they were pretty bold as they talked to the king about how everything's good except for that little piece, and you need to get it straightened out. Kind of like what we do with the road department these days, you know, in some ways, or someone who doesn't seem to be getting something done in our neighborhoods. Well, everyone was enjoying the wonderful feast. They had locked the doors, and all of a sudden someone heard a little rap kind of at the door. When they opened it, it was a very, very old man, stooped, bent, filthy. Came in covered from head to foot in dirt. And people, as he would walk slowly towards the king, people would look, and of course, they'd start to say things like, gosh, who does he think he is coming to this event? You know, how disrespectful in front of the king to be doing something like that. They should throw this bum out. You know, put him in a dungeon. I had to throw a corrections reference in there somewhere. Throw him in the dungeon. But as he approached the king, he was carrying this enormous bag over his shoulders, and that was why he was just taking so much time. He got there, put that bag on the ground, and he said, Your Majesty, I'm so sorry that I'm late. I don't want to be disrespectful at all, but he said, you see, when I got to a certain part of the highway, it was covered in things, debris and garbage and trash and all types of things, and he said, the only thing I knew to do was to start picking it up. And so he said, for the last several hours, I've been picking up trees and garbage and moving dirt and everything else. And he says, I apologize for my appearance. But when I got to the bottom of the pile, there was this bag, and when I opened it up, it was full of gold and jewels and all types of precious things. And he said, I'm here to return the bag to its rightful owner. Well, the king looked at him and he said, well, you are the rightful owner. And he said, no, your majesty, I've never known this type of wealth in my life. I've never had any access to anything like this before. I can't accept this. And he says, no, it is yours. And looking out over everyone in the group, he said, because you see, he who travels the road best is he who makes the way smoother for others. And I want each of you to remember as we go through the rest of this day and as you go in your work, that the smoother you make the way for those people you work with, even the toughest ones, the ones that you wish you didn't have to work with, it makes the way smoother for generations to come. And I know I can testify of all of that. That is true. That is how we see things in the system. And 20 years later, when I'm running into people I worked with, and they're very successful in so many occupations, and they bring their wives and their kids to meet me, and they say, this is the guy that gave me a shot. It's worth it all. So I wish you well in all of this, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.